You desire, it's fun you're going to get at Flat Stick Pub. It doesn't matter what the occasion is, whether it's date night, guys night, ladies night, or large group event, Flat Stick Pub's got you covered. They have 6 great locations across the Pacific Northwest, from Pioneer Square to Kirkland, South Lake Union, Spokane, Bellingham, and Redmond. All locations offer the best pub experience in Washington. 2 rules at Flat Stick Pub: drink local and have fun. Pretty simple. So if you like to have fun, love local beer, and great tasting food, make Flat Stick Pub your next spot. Visit them at flatstickpub.com. How about that little fancy commercial? Again, Flat Stick Pub brings you Jim Duquette every Monday, and there he is. I don't like this time of year, Jim, and I'll tell you why. Because our time is winding down, and I don't like it.
You know, I feel the same way. In fact, as I was getting ready to come on the show today, I realized that this is the last one of the season, and the season is so long as it is, but it feels like it went fast.
Yeah, it did. I mean, can we squeeze it? We can do like a couple more, like emergency ones.
Yeah, of course. Of course. Yeah,
and I was hoping this thing was going through the playoffs. I thought this thing was going to go through the World Series, Jim. You promised me that.
That is the thing that I was planning on. I always plan for these things to go deep into the postseason, especially with the pitching. But I can't help that they make base running mistakes. Really fundamentally bet like your team, okay, would not make some of the base running mistakes that we have seen the Seattle Mariners do. It's an insult to travel ball teams, to little league teams. They're not little leaguers. This is not little league baseball. They're better than that. The little leaguers are better than that. Oh my God.
Did you? I don't know if you saw it yesterday. It ended up not hurting them, but I don't know if you saw the play yesterday where they had Robles dead to rights on a pickoff at second base, but they ended up the pitcher ended up throwing it away.
Right.
He was so picked off. But then he runs the third. They throw that ball away. He ends up scoring.
Right.
It's just like unbelievable.
Yeah. And well, and Julio, they're back picking Julio at second base, which hardly ever happens. But just because, he's been, so bad and Robles has been so bad, they're trying things that most teams don't try because they're getting off too far of the base. They're not paying attention, whatever it is. The brain cramps, have been going on here, unfortunately, lately.
Hey, now that you brought that up, and I felt that happened so long ago. I even write that down, and I needed to remind myself to ask you that. What did you make of that play with Julio? And you just think that he thought that because a bat was flying at him, it was a dead ball?
I do think that, because it's such an unusual thing that, okay, bat goes flying, time's called. You just don't see that, right? Usually when you see a bat fly, by the way, it ends up over in the dugout. It ends up, in the netting that protects the fans behind the dugout. We've seen that a few times. You very rarely see it go for launching down third base. So it's unusual in that sense. But I think in his brain, he was more worried about not getting hurt by a flying object and not even, for whatever reason, realizing that the ball is still live. And I think, Maniac is yelling at him to get back to it. It just doesn't happen very often. But my oh my, I mean, that one, I still think the Robles one was worse, even though
I agree.
You have one of the best run producers that's active run producers in the sport in Justin Turner at the plate, bases loaded, 3-0 count. Like, I still cannot believe that he thought it was okay to try to steal home.
And then there's some people, the rationale, well, he's just trying to make something happen. I'm like, it's a bases loaded with the guy who's the most professional hitter on the team. You just mentioned it. And it's 3-0. No one does that. Like I helped coach my son's football team, like, Pop Warner football team. Yeah. And there's a bunch of baseball players on there, and they're 10 and 11. And I set up the scenario to all of them. They had not seen the game. And I said, here's the scenario. He's at third. Yeah. Here's the count. Here's the situation. And they're like, why would you do that? Like, what? Why would you try to go home on that? Yeah. I mean, these kids are 10 and 11.
Right. Yeah, exactly. They all know. Everybody in the world knows you wouldn't go in that situation. And Robles, I know. Anyway, that's one of the worst base running blunders I can remember. And I've seen a lot of baseball, and there's I'm sure a few others that if I went through my memory banks, I could recall. But that one,
that's right up there.
Top 3 or 4 forever.
Jim Duquette, MLB Network Radio, former Mets and Orioles GM, current host, MLB Network Radio on Sirius XM. Monday visit again, brought to you by Flat Stick Pub. Perfect night, perfect spot, I should say, for date night, guys' night, ladies' night, large group event. Visit one of their 6 locations across the Northwest at flatstickpub.com. Well, he did it. He did it. He didn't join the club. He started the club 50-50. Here's my. Can he get to 60-60?
Boy, at this rate, I wouldn't deny it. I mean, it's 55-55. I think that's definitely in sight now, too. That's amazing. I mean, especially when you look at the game that he had the other night, the 10 runs batted in, 3 homers, just the stolen bases, like all of it, I cannot believe what he's been able to do. And, I think when we talked about him during the course of the year, a lot of this, if you go back to, I think it was 2020, he had a down season that year, and he went to Seattle and worked with Ichiro, right? I mean, we've had these conversations in the winter that year, and from that point on, he's, I think, worked out up there ever since. And that's when his career really took off, is when he started changing around his workout regimen and plan, and he's taken his game to another level, both offensively, pitching wise, obviously conditioning wise, all of that.
Yeah, it's when I'm watching highlights of that, and again we get caught up in it. But I don't know. You've probably you've watched more baseball than I have. I haven't seen a single greater performance from an individual in a baseball game in my life.
No, and there's always guys. Okay, there was other 6-for-6s like he had. Sean Green had had a game where he hit 4 home runs, had I think 20 total bases. But when you take into context, and again, I had a player, Edgardo Alfonso, had a 6-for-6 game, unbelievable game. But when you take into context what he did and the fact that he gets them into the postseason, the Dodgers, for that's like 12 straight years, the fact that he's never been in the postseason, so he gets, he catapults himself into it. He gets to 50-50, which no one had ever done. Like just the game in its entirety with everything that was on the line and ended up coming out of it, I think is the single best game that I've ever seen. And I think that we will ever see. I mean, it's really hard to top those type of games anyway, but in the context of him setting the record is amazing.
Okay, what are they missing? Because we look at as we're getting closer and closer to the postseason. There's not one team that is, or a couple of teams that really have, at least in my opinion, haven't separated themselves. That no doubt about it, they're gonna win the whole thing. And it's not usually like that, anyways, Jim. But there usually seems to every year be 1 or 2 teams that you're like, yeah, that's the team to beat. Probably going into the season, we all thought it was going to be the Dodgers because of all the money that they spent on the team.
Sure.
The pitching woes have hurt them. What is it that's keeping them back? What do they lack? Is it just the one thing, that being starting pitching, at least consistent starting pitching?
I think it's consistent starting pitching. I have some questions about their bullpen too. I don't know. They definitely don't have the depth in pitching that other teams in the league have. I think they have to, for them to go through. They need all these things. As an example, they need Yamamoto to put it together, which he has not done yet since he's come back off the injured list. They have, so if he does, and they do have Jack Flaherty, so that's 2 starters. That's one more than what they had last year. Last year they went into the postseason with 1 healthy starter, and that's why it collapsed. I don't think it's going to be anything different. The one difference they have this year is that their offense has been really, really good. So last year Freeman and Betts struggled, but now they have Ohtani, Teoscar, Hernandez. They have others, to fit in the lineup and deepens the lineup. Muncy, Edman, the bottom of their lineup, is much deeper than it was even earlier in the season. So they can outscore you, and win that way. But most of the time in the postseason, you need a balance of both. And I think that's where they fall short, is in that pitching category, starting pitching and bullpen for me.
Yeah. What are the best, like, as we get close though, and I want to get to the AL West, or not the AL West, but just the AL collapse by the Twins and the Royals. No one wants that. No, it doesn't seem that anybody wants that wild card spot, right?
Right.
But right now, if you said you handicapped the best teams in the American League, the best team in the American League, best team in the National League, who would it be?
Best team in the American League I think it's Houston. They've been playing well enough, and really since they were 10 games under, I think they're the deepest now that Kyle Tucker's back. Now they have a 5-man rotation that is healthy and pitching well. I think their bullpen is deep as well. So it's to me it's the same old team. I would go there, and I think the Yankees, have started to play better again. They were dominant early, then they went through a lull, and now they've started to figure some things out again. I think those are the two. I look at those two teams as a kind of a crash course in the American League, in the ALCS. Wouldn't shock me if either one of them was the representative in the American League in the World Series.
Well, I mean, can you imagine what it's like to be a Royals fan right now and just watch this?
No.
I mean, that to not win a game on your homestand, to be in the position where you look like you were a lock. You were a lock for the postseason. And now you've got to go in the final 5-6 games of the season. You got to sweat it out.
Well, and I was going through teams that have had collapses and didn't come out of it. So you see this, over a history, and I know you've seen them too, but you see teams when they go into this funk and they can't come out of it, and it ends up, some of them don't get to the postseason, or if they do, they just can't get out of their own way in the first round. And I go back to it happened to the Padres, I think it was in 2010. I went back to 2011, both Boston and Atlanta down the stretch, lost, could not get in. I wasn't with the Mets at the time, but when I left the Mets 2 years later in 2007, they gave up a 7-game lead with 17 left. It's one of the worst collapses ever. I go back to when I was with the Mets in '98. We lost our final 5 games. We had a chance to get in the wild card. The Braves swept us the last weekend. Like, we should have gotten in. And I just remember that feeling where every day you're like, okay, we can start over, start fresh, and you get off to a bad start. Like, you get behind early, and it just takes on its own life. Your fans kind of feel it too, and they add to unfortunately they add to the pressure that your team is feeling. Like, there's so many things that are going on there, and that's where I feel for Kansas City right now, and I feel for Minnesota too. They cannot get out of their own way. Minnesota, it's been going on even longer. Detroit, I was at the ballpark the other day in Baltimore. They're playing the Tigers. All right, AJ Hinch, I talked to him for 30 minutes. He's like, our team is so new to the postseason. We're so young. We don't even know what pressure is right now. We don't feel pressure because we don't know it. And now here they are tied for the second wild card and looking like they're in the position, that they're going to get in. So, it's a complete opposite of what I'm seeing with the Orioles that's playing really tight right now. So there's 3 teams: Baltimore, Kansas City, Minnesota, all playing tight, all playing poorly here down the stretch.
We've talked a lot this year, you and I, and probably national pundits, about the struggles of Julio Rodriguez. But you just were talking there about the Orioles, and it got me thinking. Adley Rutschman, what went on this year with him?
He's really, really struggled from the left side primarily. I'm watching him this weekend, and usually there's one thing, and then they make adjustments, and then sometimes it becomes another thing, or sometimes they come out of it. Early on, he was taking some big swings, collapse in the backside, sometimes go down on one knee, just a huge swing. Now he's shortened up his swing, but he's late. So they're challenging him with fastballs up in the strike zone, and he can't get to it. He's getting started. So he's getting started late. So the ball's already on him when he's making contact. It's been a little bit of that too. Like, it's not like he's not trying. He's like trying to make adjustments. You're not seeing it. And so, I think that's the thing. Even with someone like Julio, when he had the struggles, like, okay, I'm going to try this for a while. Okay, that's not working. I try something else. And then before you know, you get away from some of the strengths that you had originally because you were constantly making adjustments. So, I think that those are the kind of the cautionary tales you got to kind of sort through. If you're hitting the ball hard and you're making solid contact, then you got to stay with your approach. Rutschman's kind of had similar type of some of the conversations we had about Julio has been going on with Adley too.
Yeah, it's just and then you see that, and then you see Bobby Witt Jr. just have the season that he's been having. I mean, it's a bright future for so many great players in the American League, young players. But if you were to advise Julio, what would be your advice for Julio going into this offseason? Just in terms of like a preparation or just a different mental approach, physical approach, what would it be?
Well, I think there's got to be some kind of I don't know if it's play winter ball because that has its own potential issues. The Mets, one of their top prospects, played winter ball and he ended up injuring his knee and missed the entire year. This year, his name is Ronnie Mauricio, and he played in the Dominican Winter League. Some guys like to play in that, even if it's for a couple of months, just to keep their timing, to be to kind of get yourself ahead of others in spring training. To me, it's got to be something like that. If it's in your training regimen, it's go get live pitching a lot earlier than you normally do. Maybe that's in the month of January. In Arizona, it could be something along those lines at the spring training site. But it's got to start, I think, with that kind of because of the fact he's been such a slow starter now in his entire career. There's got to be some kind of change this winter. For him to get to the live pitching so that he can, hit the ground running, in April and May.
Jim, there's no doubt that a change or at least a benefit has been whatever his relationship is with Edgar Martinez. And whatever Edgar is telling him, and it just seems like, hey, let's simplify our approach. Let's kind of block out all the noise. Maybe let's push the analytics to the side here for a second. Let's get back to basics.
Yeah,
see the ball, see the ball, hit the ball. Would it be? I know it's not that simplistic, but would it be wise for him just to spend an off season with him and maybe pivot away from the personal hitting coach in Florida?
So I would absolutely try to go to even if it's not necessarily the entire winter, but with Edgar spending a week at a time with him every month. If I was running the front office, we would send certain guys, hitting coach to go see certain guys, a pitching coach to go see certain guys. Obviously your strength and conditioning, your sports performance, they would go to see certain guys. Certain guys were priorities for whatever reason, right? So his priority is to work on his hitting. And if that means, having Edgar go meet him wherever, to go and work on some of these things that they've been working on. I think to simplify his overall approach is 100% what needs to happen. And, I think it's up to the Mariners to kind of give him some veteran leadership support as well, in that lineup. So he doesn't have to feel like this entire offense is centered around him, even though we know that it is. We've talked about JD Martinez before. Guys like that are going to be out there in the free agent market that they could bring in to just help him and take some of the pressure off.
I think when you said that, the person I was thinking of is a guy that's with the Twins right now and they're struggling is Carlos Santana.
Right.
Is that he was just such a great influence for Julio and just that presence. And I think not having him on the team, whether there's much truth to it, I just think that had an effect on him. Yeah. And, having somebody, that's in the lineup that can help him a little bit more on and off the field for Julio.
Yeah. Well, I think Santana is another one of those guys that, around the cage, he's a baseball junkie, he's a lifer. The guy knows how to hit, and has a great idea of the strike zone. Those are Martinez is that way. Justin Turner is that way, but, he's 40 years old and, at the end of his career. I think, obviously Edgar and what he had done in his past is a really good fit too. No one would understand better, the struggles in Seattle,
sure,
and how difficult it is to hit there, all of those things than Edgar. And even though he didn't have a ton of struggles in his career, but I think it's that, it's got to be, a combination of, hitting coach, keeping it simple, working on some of those things, but veteran, presence that, again, Julio's going to go through his struggles just like everyone else is, but there's always someone there, a couple guys there to kind of help pick up the pieces. Listen, Teoscar, if you look at Teoscar, his impact, Teoscar's had an unbelievable relationship with Ohtani, right? I know he had a ton of strikeouts, but that personality and keeping things loose, I feel like in some ways is missing from that clubhouse.
Well, that, and I think Suarez too.
Suarez is another great guy, right? I mean, he had such a terrible first half. Arizona benched him. Torrey Novello benched him, told him that, hey, you need to do this, this, and this. And guess what? He made the adjustment. And he's been one of the best second half hitters in the league. Yeah. So, there are guys, they had some guys there, and I think that, that part of it, when you start readjusting the offensive lineup, you tend to forget that there were some positives in some of those lineups that were additions that were, I think, helpful for Julio to have around.
A last thing for you, Jim, the CJ Abrams story.
Oh my goodness.
So they don't like that you're out all night gambling at a casino?
They don't like the fact that he was out. That meant like a lot of their fans who were in town to watch them play in Chicago at Wrigley were at the Now,
was it a bar or a casino? Where was he at?
It was a casino.
Okay.
8 a.m. Now, listen, he could have been there early for the breakfast buffet, but I mean, they have good buffets there, right? So maybe in fairness, he was that, but I don't think that is the case. And here's the other thing: that wasn't the only time. Like they've had some other issues with him behind the scenes, as we know, and so they haven't really held him accountable before. This is one of those where they did. Now, I know plenty of players that have been out all night and showed up to the ballpark the next day overtime. I don't want to name any names, but plenty.
Please do.
Plenty. Yeah, please do. Plenty have done that. And one guy that my cousin had was Mo Vaughn. Mo Vaughn spent a lot of time. Remember Mo in Boston spent time at some of the bars in Boston, and then my cousin would get a phone call, "Hey, your first baseman's heading to the ballpark. He came right from such and such a bar." So, but the difference here is Mo had a long-term contract and he couldn't be optioned to the minor leagues. CJ Abrams is not even he's just over 2+ service time years and had options left. And so they sent him to the minor leagues to send him a message. We'll see if, this gets his attention. But one of those unusual things that happens. And listen, they could have said, "Nah, we're not going to play you the rest of the year," and kept him in the big leagues. It's not going to affect his service time, but it will affect his pocket. He's going to lose about $30,000 easily just this year.
But there's nothing nefarious with gambling or anything.
So I don't think so. That's the thing we don't know. I don't know if we have any of those details yet. Obviously being there in a casino doesn't mean he was gambling. But
sure, right.
I do think that there's more to this that we don't know about yet, and I think it'll come out over time. But they have a really good, talented young team, and Abrams was their all-star this year. They need to get him on track. If there's some issues with him being late, showing up late for meetings, which apparently has been a problem as well. This is the time to fix it, because I think they're going to be a team to watch next year, a team on the rise.
You are the best. Jim Duquette, MLB Network Radio, former Mets and Orioles GM, current host, MLB Network Radio, Sirius XM. Tell everyone when that show airs, where they can find you and when.
Yes, on Sirius XM, channel 89, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. Eastern time. That's Monday through Friday. I have my show, the front office show, on Sundays, 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. with Jim Bowden. So, we do it 6 days a week at that same channel. And, man, oh, man, right in the middle of the pennant race. There's so much to talk about. It's been fun. And we were talking about the Mariners today. They're on life support, but we're still talking about it because of how badly Minnesota and Kansas City are playing right now.
It's just there for them.
It's there.
It's just there for them to just walk. They're just opening the door. They're saying, "Come on, Mariners, walk on through."
Here you go.
And
we'll trying to give it to them.
We'll see if they can. Jim joins us every Monday. A few more visits with Jim before it's over. Every Monday, brought to you by Flat Stick Pub. Again, perfect spot for a date night, guys night, ladies night, large group event. Visit one of their 6 locations across the Northwest at flatstickpub.com. And in case you missed this, you can find it everywhere: YouTube, Apple, Spotify, wherever you find your podcast, and of course up at pucksports.com.